Hello, friends. Today I have what I hope will be a treat, at least for some of you. We are looking at the New York Times Hard Sudoku, and today is November 12th, 2022. I went through this puzzle myself this morning, and I thought this would be a very nice opportunity for me to demonstrate how I personally use pencil marks. Because some of you might find this puzzle difficult, I will show you how you can make it easy without complicating matters more than necessary. So, without further ado, I will begin this puzzle by using no pencil marks until I reach what I would say is a critical point where it is difficult to spot the next digit. So let's do that, shall we? I will do the easy numbers first. There's a 9 here and there's a 9 here, and that will put a 9 in this cell, of course. And now I know that one of these two cells will be a 9. And the other cell will be a 4, because we have this 4 here and that blocks these two cells, and we have this 4 up here that blocks these two cells. So one of these two cells will have to be a 4, and that puts a 4 in one of these two cells, of course, as well. So I'm not putting any pencil marks in here just yet. And there is also a 4 to be found for this cell because we have the 4 here. And that blocks these 3 cells, and we have these two 4s. They block these 4 cells. So we only have this cell that can take a 4 in the top row. And now we know that one of these 3 cells will have to be a 4 because we have a 4 already in these 2 columns. And we need, for the 3rd column in this chute of 3 columns, we still need a 4 for that. By the way, the other digit that needs to go in one of these 3 cells is going to be a 6, because we have the 6 here. And we still need to find a 6 for this column. And clearly, neither the 6 nor the 4 can go in these 3 cells. Therefore, they will have to go here in some order. And by the same token, I know that the 1 and the 8 here will have to find homes in these 3 cells. And since there already is a 1 here and a 1 here that block these 4 cells, we know that the 1 will have to go here. While I'm doing this, I automatically note that a 1 will have to go in one of these 2 cells for this column, because we have the 1 here and the 1 here. It's not something that I'm concerning myself with right now. It's just something that I notice at a glance, and I tend to revisit it when I get as far as to finding a 1 for these 2 cells. We talked about the 8 here. It blocks these 3 cells, doesn't it? And the 8 here blocks these 2, and that gives us an automatic 8 for this cell right here. And now one of these 2 cells will have to be an 8. And a pattern that we often find with the New York Times is a pair that are quite easy to find. We got the 9 here and the 7 here, and they block these 2 cells from being 7s and 9s. And we got the 7 and a 9 here, and they block these 2 cells from being a 7 and a 9. So these 2 cells now will have to be a 7-9 pair. And that quite severely limits the open cells for the rest of the digits for this box. For example, I know now that since these cells are 7 and 9, and this 3 blocks these 2 cells from being a 3, I now know that these 2 cells will have to be an 8 and a 3. That leaves these 2 cells, and they now have to be a 5 and a 2. And while it's not strictly necessary for me to use pencil marks at this time when I solve a puzzle like this, I do realize that it might be a little difficult to follow my train of thoughts if I don't use pencil marks. So for demonstration purposes, I will use them now. Now, the 8 here must go in one of these 2 cells, right? And the 3 here forces a 3 in the same 2 cells. So I'll enter a 3 and an 8 here, and I'll enter a 3 and an 8 here. I want you to notice that I will not enter using the Snyder notation, because to me personally, the Snyder notation is too slow. The Snyder notation would tell me to enter a 1 here and a 1 here because this 1 blocks this cell and this 1 blocks this cell. So these two cells can only take ones. And a 1 can go nowhere else in this 3 by 3 block. However, I don't know if there are 2 or 3 or even 4 more candidates that could potentially go in these two cells. And therefore, I just don't bother. I only bother with cells that can have two values, exactly two values, like these two cells. And I can also enter the 7 and the 9 here, even though for practical purposes, I would never do that because I found the 7 and the 9 already. I don't need to enter them because I can remember them. But let's say just for the sake of demonstration, enter the 2 and the 5 here and the 2 and the 5 here. And I think if you're used to using Snyder notation, if you have single digits spread all throughout a puzzle, I think you will find that this method looks a lot neater because you know exactly when you look at the candidates for a cell that those are the only two candidates possible for that cell. And it's clear to see now that we need a 2, 4, and a 6 to fill these three empty cells. And the 2 here and the 2 here block all the cells except for this one. So this is now a 2. And of course, it's not a candidate 2. It's a big number 2. And these two now are 4 and 6. And 4 and 6 here. If you recall, we found out that these two cells have to be a 4 and a 9. I will explain again why. We have the 9 here and we have a 9 here, and that basically forces a 9 into one of these two cells. And we have a 4 here and we have a 4 here, and they force a 4 into one of these two cells. A Snyder notation would make me do this. But as I just explained a moment ago, that's too slow for me and it's too error prone. So instead, I do this. I only enter values into cells that can take exactly two values. If the puzzle is going to be really, really tough, then I might have to resort to enter all the possible pencil marks for a cell. But in a vast majority of cases, that isn't necessary at all. And once I do this, I know, of course, that there are still 3 empty cells to go in this column. And I quickly see that they have to be a 2, 6, and a 7. There's a 6 here, so I will enter a 2 and a 7 here. Because many times when I do this and I then scan across a row, I find triples and things like that, and that makes the solving a lot easier. So 2, 6, and a 7. And up here, it will be a 2 and a 6 because there's already a 7 here, of course. This cell could be a 2, 6, and a 7, so I won't touch it. And again, there's a 6 here and there's a 6 here. So Snyder would have me enter a 6 here and a 6 here. Mind you, I'm not saying at all that Snyder is a bad notation because it's recommended by most expert solvers. And I'm not even an expert solver. I just dabble. But for me personally, I like the grid to be clean. And I don't want single pencil marks anywhere if I can avoid it. Again, this is just a demonstration of how I do it. Now that we have this pair, we can find out that this cell will have to be a 7 or a 9, not a 5. And this cell will have to be a 7 or a 9 because a 3, 5, 7, and a 9 are the last 4 digits necessary to fill this box. We have a 3 and a 5 already in the bottom row, and that leaves only these two possible values. And that again means that this will have to be a 3 or a 5, and this will have to be a 3 or a 5. And as you can see now, when we scan upwards, we have what amounts to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 givens. I count the 7, 9 pairs as givens in terms of finding the last values for a column or a row. And we now have a 3 and a 5 and a 2 and a 5. And up here, we already have a 5. So the only two values that can go in here are going to be a 2 and a 3. So we have a triple in this column, and we have a pair, or a double as it were. And that doesn't allow me yet to pinpoint which digit goes where, but it really helps me eliminate all other values. When I look at a cell that already has candidates, I know those are the only possible values for that cell. And again, Snyder would tell me to take this one and look across, and this one and look up, and put a 1 and a 1 candidate in these two cells. And again, yes, I could do that, but that doesn't tell me which other candidates are possible for that cell. So I would keep having to analyze those two cells again and again. Using my own privately developed method, as it were, I know that cells that have values in them don't need any more consideration. While I'm looking at that, I notice that I have 3 empty cells across this row number 4, and they have to be a 6, 8, and a 4. That would put an 8 and a 6 in this cell, and an 8 and a 4 in this cell. This one could be a 6, 8, or a 4, so I don't touch it. Now, having found the 7, 9 pair in the bottom row, we know now that we still need to find a 1, 4, 6, and an 8 to complete the row. There's a 1 and a 4 here, and that puts a 6 and an 8 in this cell. Now you can see one of the benefits of using this notation. You have now a 6, 8 here, and you have a 6, 8 here, a remote pair of 6 and 8. And because I only put values into by value cells, I now have what amounts to 5 givens for this column. And the empty cells now will have to be occupied by a 3, 5, 7, and a 9. There's a 9 here and a 7 here, so this automatically becomes a 3 or a 5. And I know now that a 9 will have to go either here or here, because there's no other place for a 9 in this column. I also like to look at intersections of rows and columns that already have a lot of different digits in them. Take this cell here, for example. It could take a 2, but not a 3, 4, 5, but it could take a 6, but not a 7, 8, or a 9. So you can only put 2 different values into this cell. Always bear in mind that there are often numerous ways to solve a particular puzzle. Only the best handcrafted puzzles offer you a single path through the puzzle. So some of you have doubtlessly spotted other and quite possibly better ways to solve this puzzle. My aim today is just to illustrate how I personally go about using pencil marks. We have a 4 candidate in this cell, and in this cell, in this cell, and in this cell. So either way, we do have the 4 covered for these 2 rows. Now we need to find a 4 for this row down here. Since we already have a 4 candidate in this block, and we know it must go in one of these 2 cells, these 2 cells are blocked from containing a 4. And the 4 here blocks this cell from containing a 4, which we can also see because we already have the 2 only possible candidates for this cell. So the 4 will have to go here. And now this 4 and this 4 and the 4 here forces a 4 into this cell. And as we recall, a 4 for this column must go either here or here. And since now this 4 blocks this cell, we know that this is a 4. And immediately we know that an 8 will have to go over here somewhere. And we also know that the 6 will have to go over here. So now if we want, we could enter pencil marks for a 6 and an 8 like so. I wouldn't normally do it myself because I can easily remember that those two are 6 and 8s. But again, for the sake of illustration, I will enter them. And now we just need to find a 2, 5, 6, and an 8 to complete this column 1. There's a 2 here and an 8 here, and that 5 and a 6 in these two cells as candidates. And those are the only candidates that can be contained in this cell. And now I scan across this road and I see that we've already accounted for 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9. So from now on, I will be on the lookout for a 1 and a 7 to place in this row. At the moment, I have this 1, so my 1s are limited to this cell right here and this cell, of course. And the 7 is not really limited because it can go here, here, or here. So I'm not touching those cells at this time. On second thought, though, I know that a 1 cannot go here, right? Because there's a 1 here. And because there is no other 1 present in the bottom row, I know that one of these two cells will have to be a 1. And since my system, if you want to call it that, tells me that and 1 can't go here either because it can only contain a 5 or a 6, then this is the only cell that can take a 1 in this block, and therefore in this row and in this column. So the last open digit for this row is going to be a 7, and I can't place it still. I have to wait a little until I find out if it goes here or if it goes here. And frankly, it can't go in either of these two places because we already have a 7 here, don't we? So a 7 will have to go here or here rather. And because we only need to fill 3 empty cells in the bottom row, and this is a 6, we know that this will have to be a 1 or an 8. And now we know that this cell must be an 8. And how do we know that? Well, this cell can't be an 8 because it must contain a 2 or a 6. This cannot be an 8 because we already have accounted for an 8 in one of these two cells. And this one cannot be an 8. And therefore, the cell here must be an 8. And now we know that an 8 will have to go down here together with the 1. Therefore, we can enter a pencil mark here for a 1 and an 8. Always pairs, remember? Now, the 1, 8 here and the 8 here, of course, takes the 8 away from these two candidates. And since they can only contain either an 8 or a 6, we know now that the real candidate or the real digit here is going to be a 6. And that takes away the 6 from this cell, which now has to be a 5, which takes away the 5 from this cell, which must be a 3. And I hope that by now you can see how I use this kind of notation to speed up the process. Of course, the 3 here takes away the 3 from this cell, which now becomes a 2, which takes away the 2 from here, and now this is a 6, and therefore this cell must be a 2. The 2 here blocks this cell, and this 2 blocks these two cells, so this is now a 2. I don't need to, but I will enter a 7 and a 9 here, and a 7 and a 9 here, so you can see what is happening. There is a 4, 6, and a 9 already in this column that can see this cell, and therefore it must be a 7. Because we have this 2 now, we can take away the 2 from this cell and make it a 7. And the 7 takes away the 7 candidate from here, and now this is a 9, and this, of course, must be a 7. The 7 here gives me the 9 here and the 7 here. This is the most important aspect of the way that I use pencil marks. As soon as I take away one of the two numbers that are candidates in a cell, I know exactly that the corresponding number will have to go somewhere else. And of course, this is now a 5 and this is a 2. The 5 here blocks the 5 from going into these three cells, and therefore this cell down here must be a 5. Of course, these two cells will have to be a 5 and an 8, but I won't bother inputting them now. But since I know that one of these cells must be an 8, I also know now that this cell cannot be an 8. It must therefore be a 1, and the 8 goes here. And now that I have this 1 and I have the 1 here and the 1 up here, this cell automatically becomes a 1. And now that I scan across, then this cell is now a 1. These two are now a 3 and a 6. And this cell here and the cell up here, they form a remote pair of 3 and 5. And we can resolve those because of the 5 here. This cell must be a 3, and therefore this must be a 5. And now we just need to find the digit for this cell, and of course it must be a 6. And the 6 gives me a 4 for this cell, a 9 for this, a 4 for this, and a 6 for this cell. It's just a matter of cleaning up the grid because now everything more or less comes together. The 7 here and the 7 here forces a 7 in this cell, doesn't it? And therefore in this cell. And now we just need to find a 3 for this one. And that gives me a 3 for this cell as well, and resolves the 3-8 pair we had here, like so. This must now be an 8, and therefore this becomes a 5. And the 5 here and the 5 up here forces a 5 in this cell. The last cell here has to be a 9, of course. Now we have a 6-8 pair still going on here, but we have a 6 down here. So this cell must become an 8, and this is 6. And the 3 here forces the 3 to leave this candidate cell, and it becomes a 5. The last cell here up at the top in column 8 is going to be a 3, and that puts a 3 in this cell and a 6 in this one, and therefore a 6 in this cell. This cell now must be a 2, and so must this. The last cell to be filled is this one is going to be an 8. I know that this was a rather long-winded puzzle, but I think it demonstrates very clearly how I use pencil marks. My goal for using pencil marks when I do use them is to keep the puzzle clear and neat. I don't want single pencil marks in any cell because it makes it more difficult for me, because I will have to revisit that cell a few times when I have to find more pencil marks for that particular cell. That's not saying that I will never do that, because some puzzles are extremely difficult and require me to fill in all possible pencil marks, frankly. You may not agree with my method, but alas, this is my method, and I just wanted to share it with you, and maybe it will help some of you. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll be back for more soon. Bye for now.